Today's MakerStory is John Cunningham and Chris Chilek. Both of them started Pickaprof at UT, which became MyEdu, which you see on the screen. They are best friends since high school, and have a really interesting story about how they got started together and how they built the web apps over at UT, and then how that became MyEdu, and then how they eventually exited. Currently, John is working at W2O, which is like an incubator.
Well, so okay, W2O Group is a social media agency. So we do social media analytics, tracking and reporting and that kind of thing, and it really kind of grew up and started out as an agency. I came on board as the CTO to turn it into a software company as well. So I'm bringing in developers and kind of proper understanding of software, build processes and what we're doing, and taking what previously was custom development and turning it into software products that we can launch for our customers.
And Chris is working at a startup of his own.
It's and I'll just be vague about it. We haven't publicly released a whole lot of stuff yet, but part of our market validation you can see is homespin.com, which is a visual search experience for the real estate market. So it's we were the first to market. Of course, now everybody has the cascading tile layout, right? But we were the first to do it for the real estate space in February of this year, I believe. And so there's some interesting patent pending technology behind what we're doing, and we're continuing to grow that startup as well. Great. We're also hiring devs, so you know. FYI.
Yeah, back off, I'm hiring devs. When y'all graduate?
3 weeks. 3 weeks. Yeah.
Bring it on.
So we were hoping you can tell us more about MyEdu, kind of how
Sure.
it started and what it became, and where you exited.
Sure.
From it.
You sure? Well, should we take it all the way back to the
all the way
beginning?
back to the
beginning.
The story of Pickaprof, MyEdu, really starts with Chris and I in college in, I guess, February or so of 2000. We were hanging out and drinking beers as we were off to do, and kind of came up with this idea of saying, man, I wonder if we could get some certain pieces of data from the school and combine that with a platform to show students not just an understanding of even just reviews or something really simple, but an understanding of here's some qualitative and quantitative data together, so you can see this is how many A's through F's your professors gave in these classes over the last however many years, and that kind of thing. So went down to the University Open Records office and talked to a few people and got kicked out a few times, and came back and talked to people a few more times, and ended up with a 3.5-inch floppy disk. I don't know if you guys know what those are.
Heard about that.
With a bunch of text files on it that had every grade given by every professor at Texas A&M from 1984 through, I think, fall of '99 was the first kind of set. And then over the course of several all-night hacking sessions and many, many cases of Mountain Dew, we came up with the very first, what now, looking back, I'd call an MVP version of Pickaprof, which was really basic, search, find how these people graded, review your professors. We would, check the reviews and make sure they were of appropriate quality, and then ship it all out. And I think we mostly did it just to see if we could do it, and kind of to meet girls. And it didn't work very well to meet girls, but we did figure out that we could do it. And on our way out of school, instead of taking jobs with, who was it?
Motorola.
With Motorola, and for me actually with advertising and PR company, we decided that money is stupid. You don't want that. Let's go start a company together. So
it was an interesting combination as well. So, and for the entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs in the group, John said MVP, minimum viable product, if you haven't already heard that turn of phrase. What we were lucky enough to be part of the target demographic whenever we came up with the idea of Pickaprof. And so we were sort of, to a certain extent, when we decided to go ahead and build it, we're like, yes, we would definitely use this. And we, of course, asked enough people. And I think the first semester after we put the MVP out, we had a whopping 800 people sign up for the service. And we're like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
You have
to remember the internet was like 4 years old at the time.
Yes. John and I were just joking before class. We've been friends since before the internet. Anyway, so we put up the first version and tested it, and our market validation was 800 people coming on and saying, hey, this is really great. And so whenever we graduated, we did the smart thing in 2000 as the bubble was nearing burst. we decided to start a company, and we got some angel financing, and we launched Pickaprof at UT and A&M, and then we added 40 schools, and then 80 schools, and we eventually ended up at about 800 schools.
Mm-hmm.
So we just grew the business more or less organically from there.
Yeah, and so we literally got funding, I think, about an hour before the bubble burst. Like it was the last possible moment that we could have gotten any amount of anything in. And at the time, I was a business student and a business-minded guy, and Chris was an engineer, computer engineer by training from school, and kind of an engineering-minded guy. We both actually, though, had strengths in both places. Like by the time, if you kind of follow the path down the road, I did the books for the first month that we had the company around, and it was we nearly went out of business. It was a terrible thing. So and Chris was able to apply the kind of analytical mind to that kind of stuff. He got into doing marketing and did just in the last couple of years at MyEdu, did amazing things with SEO and really being able to get people on just as a side thing of what he was doing there with the company otherwise. So really we stretched it and had our skills really in both places. We'd stay up all night coding. We'd spend all day long trying to grow the business and kind of figuring out the next parts of the path from there. So what's the next stage of the story? I mean, you kind of jumped to the end with you.
All right. So we added schools and grew organically for a long time, and then in 2008 we decided we wanted to expand the services to be more than just pick a professor. And unfortunately, that name pigeonholed us with a certain type of activity, and so we went and purchased the name MyEdu, which is a little bit more encompassing.
That took 6 months of negotiation for some guys in South Korea.
What was the highest the price fluctuated?
We went from $150,000 down to $15,000 for the domain name.
For a 5-letter domain name with MyEdu, that's actually a really good price.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
So we rebranded, and that was its own exciting adventure and exercise in marketing that I recommend asking a lot of people about before you decide to do it. One thing, I will say this, and this is sort of a broad theme I think you'll hear in a lot of what we talk about, and John's already touched on it a little bit, is the one thing you'll do a lot of in a startup, especially if you're the one starting it up, is learn. You're sitting in a good place right now. You're all obviously motivated to learn. That doesn't stop when you walk out of the door here. In fact, if you're the one starting up the business, you're going to learn finance, you're going to learn HR, you're going to learn how to negotiate contracts for offices, you're going to learn all kinds of stuff. Don't be afraid of it. Just go figure it out, and feel free to ask, if you have resources like these guys or whoever else. Most people who've done it once will be happy to help you out. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, one of the things with people, I hear people say is, well, I want to start a company because I want to be the president. It's like, you're the janitor too, right?
Yeah. You don't start as president and just do that.
Right.
Anyway, so we did the rebrand and changed to MyEdu. We expanded the scope of services to include degree planning. We found that there's a lot of efficient, just market stuff. So for what it's worth, we found there's a lot of inefficiency in the way that credits are transferred between degrees within a school or between schools. And we set out to sort of try to find the easiest path, so that if you've taken this dozen courses, what other degree can you change to without losing half of them? That'll still be interesting to you.
We ended up doing a lot of honestly, MyEdu went through about 5 or 6 different possible ideas on what the models would be. And it was really about a year ago that the company fully concreted in what's now the current model, which you see up here, which is really kind of an idea of helping you find a job on the way out of school. To back up just a little bit, on getting into the inception of MyEdu somewhat. We had so Pickaprof, and you guys never would have been exposed to this, but Pickaprof was actually a charge for use service, which sounds crazy now to ask people to pay like $10 a year to use an online service, and actually it's starting to come back a little bit. But one of the downsides of starting right as the bubble burst was it was also, this was in the time that like Pets.com and Webvan and all these huge companies that were getting ready to IPO just completely cratered, and people stopped trusting the internet. So, and at the time it was also very expensive to start a website. Nowadays you can run up on Amazon, and in their free tier build enough of something that you could have like 5,000 people using it, and it wouldn't even bother you. Back then the startup cost, just in terms of hardware and location and everything else, to get on the internet was around $250,000. right? Just to really get you started in on it. So Pickaprof, we turned into a just straight charge for use service after all the other models seemed to, they said, oh, you're going to get advertising, you're going to use advertising to get money, right? Well, that's a great idea, but people use the service 4 times a year for about like 8 pages at a time. But people don't want to pay that much for an ad, So eventually we got to the point of it was $10 a year, $5 a semester, and it worked out really well. But then coming into 2008, the internet started to come back. Cloud computing started to come into the market. It became cheaper for people to put up competition, and honestly, what we did, we created this market of going out and getting this data. The main kind of central point of Pickaprof was always the fact that we have this real data from the school that nobody else has. You can actually see whether somebody generally gives more A's or more F's, and that's really central key point of it. And then we had schedule planners and tools and kind of SAS tools and things like that went along with it, but that was a central focal point of what we did. So competition started coming in. We came up with the MyEdu idea of really broadening the scope and saying it's not just about picking the professor, but we want you to be coming to the site every day. We want you to be, really organizing your entire college life. And then we hired a gray hair to come in and be kind of the front face of the company and go out and raise some money. So this was a really interesting transition because not only did we pivot the entire company, change the brand, change the name, change the focus, we hired a boss.
It's a fascinating thing to do.
It's a very interesting process, and it really was really and truly hiring a boss. And I mean, if you take 2 people that have egos the size of Chris and mine, and try to, and really any entrepreneur, you got to have an ego, and you got to be completely blind to possibilities of failure, or else you're in the wrong place. But you take somebody who has the kind of ego that Chris and I have, and say, okay, but we're going to bring somebody in who's going to be your CEO, and it wasn't. I mean, this wasn't even forced on us by the board. This was our choice, and then completely change the company around. You really have to look at what you're getting out of it and that kind of thing. So in this case, he had a target of a certain amount of cash he had to raise within a certain period of time. We had a time frame as part of the agreement during which we could pull the plug back on it. And this was really and truly kind of bringing this guy in to help us take the company to the next level and recognizing that was a need that we had at the time.
Yeah. The industry knowledge at that point in time said, it's great, everybody's been burned by the dot-com bubble bursting. You need somebody with experience in the mix for you to raise money. And at that point in time, we were ready to take it from an organic growth of adding 40 new schools a semester to a much more rapid growth to soak up the market, which would be adding 200 schools a semester.
Yeah, and the cool thing to me is that this is not something that you guys have to worry about at this point. Because even as little as 5 years ago, it was still more difficult to be taken seriously. It was still more difficult to understand what your market was and really prove your business models out. I mean, right now there really is no reason that you can't have a day job that makes you enough money to be able to pay your bills and be spending your time figuring out what your model is, how you're going to test it, how you're going to move forward to the point of having some amount of revenue to get in front of either an angel or just straight up bootstrap and build your business organically from there. And you can do that with little more than just either figuring out how you're going to take 6 months off of dealing with life, surf couches for a little while and eat ramen, or to the point of kind of having a day job and doing that stuff at night. The barriers to entry of this have lowered so much. I would give anything to be in your shoes now and also be 10 years younger.
So back in that time where you were still beginning, you were building this platform, you had no revenue coming in, and you raised the money. How did that happen? And what was it like for you to go through that process?
So the very, very first bit was effectively a loan from family. My dad loaned us enough money to get us through the first 3 months. And that was after we graduated from college and before we took on this first bit of angel investment. And fortunately for us at the time, the ability to get angel investment was, and it was actually pretty expensive angel investment looking back on it. But we brought in $250,000 around the end of the summer, right? Kind of as that money was, the seed money from my dad was kind of starting to dry up. And I think that to a certain degree, it's that whole, I've said over and over again, this idea of friends, family, and fools is where you kind of get the first bits of money. And that was, don't get me wrong, it was a rough 3 months. It's not like we were living in the Hilton or anything. We were eating ramen and we were doing nothing but working 20 hours a day. But we did get to the point where we got, the additional cash in and went on from there. Literally went from completely broke, eating ramen, just trying to get past the day, to these guys brought us out and took us, gave us a ride on their helicopter just to be able to spend an extra 30 minutes with us and get us to the airport faster afterwards.
And then we switched to the subscription model, and once we switched to the subscription model, it was a cash positive business.
Yeah.
And so we ran it for, I don't know how many years under that, 8 years as a cash positive business.
Maybe we should fast forward now back over to MyEdu a little bit
sure.
more. So after a year of MyEdu, interesting thing is that, so it was Chris and myself and then kind of our silent co-founder, Karen Holst, who came in and was employee number one. When she was like a student at UT, she saw the potential and she said, I want to be in this, I want to be part of it. I think we were a month old at the time. Yeah. So really she was founding partner, didn't technically get co-founder, but just right half an inch behind there on that. And we managed to divide our jobs up again, which was kind of the nice thing about having this CEO come in, is that I could just concentrate on data and kind of the technology stack back end. Chris could concentrate on the products, Karen could concentrate on the marketing, and we felt a little bit of ease and everything kind of spread out a little bit and we started moving forward. Then we started running through different possible business models for the MyEdu stuff, because we had one idea when we first brought MyEdu up. And then here's where we started to make a few mistakes. And this is some of the stuff that, when you really, so I'm a huge Lean Startup fan, and I know I've already said MVP, and that's a very Lean Startup kind of thing. Has anyone here not read Lean Startup yet? Go get it. Yeah, no, seriously. So it's if you're trying to figure out how to build a business online, I'm using this. This is what I do now in my day job as CTO at W2O Group. I am using these principles and these ideas to kickstart companies within the company that we have. So it's absolute gold, this stuff. But we came in and we started saying, well, we think people are going to like this. So we're going all the way to the end of the path and build it. And spend 6 months doing that. And then it hits, and nobody likes it.
Not a good plan.
And then we did this like 3 or 4 times. And at this point, it ended up being, it was the company was running by committee. The CEO had a very solid idea that he knew exactly what people wanted. And the truth is, there's really only one Johnny Ive in the world. And the rest of them just aren't going to get there.
Straight over all their heads.
Yeah, sorry. Guy who designed your iPhones. Yeah, anybody? All right, never mind.
Not too young for that.
Right. These things right here. After all of the different kind of thoughts and ideas and everything, we finally kind of hit on a plan that was going to be this is the plan that's working. It's the one that's there that MyEdu is using right now, which is this idea of college students don't really have a LinkedIn. They don't have a real, and LinkedIn doesn't really reach college students very well. And when you get out of school, you've all got the same degree that says the same thing, and the internship experience you have really doesn't mean all that much if you're not showcasing it very well. So this is a way to showcase big projects that you did and internships that you had and whatnot. And we had the ability to reach people from the freshman level up, so to start getting them into the system earlier. So now go out, and now what MyEdu is going out and selling this employment platform to businesses.
Chris, I know you in a different capacity through Amber and Jude.
Oh, fantastic.
So I thought this would be a good segue. It sounds like subject matter experts are really important in this type of development phase, saying, hey, let's not run to the end and then see how it goes. Mm-hmm. How do you connect with those folks? I'm imagining Jude is kind of a subject matter expert for you in Homespin.
Very much so.
Okay.
Let's see, how do I want to put that one together? Because I have another point that is equally important. This all falls up, so I'm gonna get to that in 2 seconds. I'm gonna do a 2-step to it. What John's alluded to is something that is very fundamental that people say they do all the time, but don't always execute on. Test and measure. You have an idea. Don't run all the way through to the end first. Test that idea with legitimate people, with domain experts in the space. Test it with the consumers in the space. If you're going to sell it to businesses, test it with the appropriate businesses. Make sure you're not building something that nobody wants. I know that sounds so obvious, doesn't it?
You
would be shocked.
Yeah. Has anyone seen the last 4 revisions of Blackberries?
Just throwing it out there. At the end of, I guess it was 2000 and whenever I left the company a year and a half ago, whatever year that was, my final tour of duty at MyEdu was Chief Marketing Officer. And what I did that year was implement a variety of automated strategies, words, that essentially grew the company 200% compared to the previous year. It's the largest, most sustained period of growth the company had ever seen. At the end of that, does anybody here know Jerry Seinfeld? All right, at the end of that, I Seinfelded out. I was like, top of the game, I'm going. And I took some time off because 100-hour weeks for 13 years is a little bit of a stretch. But long story short, after meeting with a bunch of people, I talked to Jude, who's the co-founder of Homespin, and he had some really great ideas about how to improve search in the real estate market because no one had tapped the visual search experience for residential real estate. And that, to bring it full circle one more time, the first thing that Jude and I did, so another interesting pairing of founders, Jude is a domain expert. He is a real estate broker. He knows a ton about real estate and the pain points and everything associated with being in the real estate industry.
And he's a thought leader on it as well. He does a lot of blogging and talking out publicly about it and everything else.
And so he's not only very knowledgeable, but also well known in the Austin area, especially as a thought leader in real estate. And so to validate the products, the designs, and the things that we do, not only does Jude weigh in with his expertise, but then we also test those concepts with realtors in the market. And are you ready? We're coming full circle on this. To bring it full circle, the test and measure. Now in this case, even though Jude's an expert in the space, even though he is arguably my most knowledgeable connection in real estate, we still test every idea. And I always jokingly at MyEdu, I use this example. I don't care if Zuckerberg walks in here and says, make that button blue, it'll work better. My answer would be, neat, let's test it. And this is something you'll find in a lot of different industries. The way that different demographics, people, whatever your vertical is, whenever you're building a new business, they all behave differently. Best practices are good guidelines. Test them. They might not work for your market at all. And I found this out in spades in the last two, in both MyEdu and also in Homespin, in our marketing efforts on both. The ideas that you don't think, it's not the prettiest email. Surprise, guys. In the real estate market, the target demographic for realtors are 50-year-old women. Yep. They don't like HTML email. They don't like pretty graphics. You know what they like? Plain text with a link. Would you have guessed that? Would any marketing firm ever have recommended that? No. They would have told me I'm crazy and it's ugly. Guess what? 25% click-through. It's insane. Sorry. If you know marketing, you expect about a 1% at best.
Yeah, it's another fun one. Anybody want to guess what the best form of marketing in 8 years that Pickaprof ever had was?
Word of mouth.
That was a good one, but I'm talking in a place where I can put dollars and get dollars in, dollars out, 3x ROI every summer that we did these campaigns.
I dropped a good hint. It's during the summer.
Koozies.
Direct mail.
Letters. Letters, printed, tri-folded letters in plain black and white envelopes. It said, to this kid that got into this university from Pickaprof University Services, and they'd open it up and the parents would read it and say, are you telling me that if I just give you $40 now, my kid's going to be able to know everything about every professor for the next 4 years? Heck yes, sign me up. Literally, we emptied the bank account getting as many of these letters out every summer as we could because it was never fail, 3x return.
Yeah. And when he says empty the bank account,
$5.
Down to $5 balance on multiple occasions because we knew the next month we would have 3 times as much money. It was like clockwork, and that's where the testing comes in. If you test, track, measure your results, and make sure you're on the right path, you can do that comfortably. But you have to know what you're getting into, and you have to know that your message is on and that it'll work the way you expect.
This is still a little uncomfortable.
Which brings us full circle to test everything, but make intelligent guesses about what might work and then test those to see what actually works. Okay, I've gone on enough about that. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
That was perfect.
Okay.
I just wanted you to kind of walk through, how do you find these folks to guide you in your test?
Yeah, one of the neat things about subject matter experts is they love to talk. So you can find people who will very happily sit down with you for the price of a coffee and that kind of thing, just by reaching out. people are timid. They don't, it's one of the best things you can do to help yourself move forward in business is just be ballsy enough to walk up to the person you want to talk to and start talking to them. And they will very frequently. I promise if I walked up to Jude, and I've known the guy now for a little while, ever since these guys started this thing up. If I walked up to Jude and said, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit about downtown real estate?" Like, I wouldn't be able to get away for an hour. And the people like talking about what they like doing. So here's book recommendation number 2 from John right now. If you haven't read this one, you know what I'm going to say, right?
Yeah.
How to Win Friends and Influence People. By far, best business book that there is. And so if you can just figure out how to actually talk to people, and it's really, really simple concepts. It's like the idea of saying, hey, go ask them what they're interested in and then listen for a while. But people tend to just love to, talk about themselves, and if both of you are trying to talk about yourself, you both think the other person is kind of an indignant ass. So
so ask more questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
I got another question for you.
Shoot.
Scaling on a web app, you said you start with 100 colleges and you go to 600 colleges. I mean, how does that work? I mean, is it all like direct mail, like you said, or like what are the other strategies you use to scale out and get more customers?
In terms of building the marketing side out?
Yeah.
The way that we did it, during the organic growth period, basically we looked at every school across the entire country. And we said, here are the ones that have more than, I think we went with 10,000 students at first, and we might have moved that back whenever we sort of soaked all those up down to 5,000 students. And we looked at all the marketing channels available on each campus. We looked at all the information available on each campus, and we had a weighted scale essentially that said, this is, availability of a student government partnership is worth 10 points. Availability of grade data is worth 10 points, whatever it happened to be. But basically using that weighted formula, we could prioritize all of the campuses based on our probable success rate on those campuses, and then grow that way. Basically, we had done the business math well enough at that point to where we could say it's going to cost this much per campus. Here are the variables. Here's how much money we have. Here's how much we spent on the last mail out. Here's how much we expect to have. So here's our growth pool for the next semester. And then took as many as we can each semester.
One of the best forms of media is PR. So we had, I think, over the course of 8 years, Pickaprof had about 600 articles written on it in various local campus newspapers, and that was a really big part of our marketing folks' jobs, was to get in touch with those campus newspapers. And the nice thing is, being a product that people get right away, understand, and want, like, hey, we'll tell you that information you didn't know about your professors and give you kind of the secret keys to how you can make your way through college and successfully. Then it was a relatively easy service to get articles written about. Yes, sir.
So you guys talk a lot about testing and measuring and learning.
Mm-hmm.
Can you sort of go over some of the characteristics of the metrics that you're looking for? Because I know sometimes people, when they're testing, they don't know what metrics really mean something and what metrics don't.
Mm-hmm.
So in your experience, what are the sort of common characteristics of effective metrics, the ones that you're looking for and trying to measure?
It's vital to identify what the success metrics for your product is going to be before you start testing, obviously.
Right.
And we've said a lot of really obvious stuff. That's another really good example of it.
Right.
When like people do that wrong all the time.
Yeah.
And yes, you should have an idea of what you're trying to test before you start testing. Start with the revenue and kind of work your way backwards to a certain degree.
Where the revenue comes
Yeah. So I mean, thinking about even something like Dropbox, right? Now, totally ubiquitous service, but 5-6 years ago was brand new. They were doing the whole freemium model. They kind of they didn't pioneer the freemium model, but they made it really popular really fast. They must have had some kind of understanding of they had to understand first this metric. How many free users do we have to sign up to get a paying user? And then once they had an understanding of what that metric was, then they knew their growth needed to be at least 10 million users a week or whatever it is in order to get the 10,000 paying users that they needed in order to make their monthly nut, right? So once you kind of back all the way back out from the idea of our goal is to make money, and your goal may not be to make a profit in the first year. Your goal may just be to prove that you can in fact make money, but nothing quite proves a model like people giving their hard-earned cash over to you for one reason or another. And Like, yeah, honestly, that will be the difference if you're actually going out and looking for funding from somebody. A really quick thing that will get you at the front of the line and at the head of the pack is to be able to walk in and say, yes, I've actually proven my revenue model out. Now I'm just looking to scale. Right? They know that that's not really the case because there's 100 things you don't know that they know you don't know.
Yeah.
And there's another 100 things that they don't know that you don't know that you're gonna have to figure out along the way. But just showing that you've run the path of the business all the way to bring money back in goes a really long way.
Okay. Cool.
Before you tested everything, you must have made some mistakes
Oh.
and learned from them.
Mm-hmm.
What were sort of like the biggest ones, and what were your learnings?
Biggest mistake is not to test. I'm just kidding. Let's see. Knowing more now, we definitely could have done a much better job in some of our hirings and in some of the ways that we did some of our funding.
My biggest boo-boo was kind of running a project that was not working well with an offshoring firm and not talking about it and trying to fix it myself. Cost us a lot of money when we didn't have a lot of money. Nearly cost us a very big money-making period that got saved by just an inch. And what it really taught me coming out of that is that really the most important thing you can do for your partners in a business is to be as transparent as possible all of the time. Like if you are always direct, open, and it wasn't a matter of being dishonest for me. This was a matter of like every day these guys weren't delivering the thing I expected them to be delivering, and every day I thought, well, if I just kick their ass a little more today, a little more tonight, we'll be able to get it done. And as opposed to if I'd come out to people early on and said, guys, this isn't working, everyone would have, pulled around me, we would have fixed it, we would have gotten it figured out. But me trying to get it fixed on my own, is a complete mess up. And by the way, I've seen this happen in multi-million-dollar deals in big companies too. This is not just an isolated thing with .coms.
Especially early on, whenever you're building a company, people wear a lot of hats, and over time you have the opportunity to sort of segment those out in different ways. And you run the risk. So going from a 3-person startup, John, myself, and Karen, where everybody wears a ton of hats and you'll have to learn a ton of things, as you progress, you start hiring people who, you don't hire quite as, I like to call them Swiss Army nerds, but you don't have to hire people who know everything. Whenever you get to a certain size, you can hire people who are just good at one thing. And that transition from a very startup, hey, we all are working, we're a tight-knit team, let's say up to a dozen people even maybe before it transitions out of that, to we're a highly segmented team. You're just going to be in charge of this. We're going to hire somebody just to do HR. Well, it's a little bit different experience because now it's not like anybody else can cover that. There's only one of them, and they're not doing a good job.
So now you need two.
Yeah, or you need somebody else to backfill, or you need, and so it brings in, I should say it this way, whenever you get to that stage, if people are hired for positions where a breadth of knowledge would still be valuable, but they don't have it, and they're not necessarily good at what they're doing, then it leaves a large hole in the company, whether it's in, God forbid, a leadership role, or even as a developer, if they're being relied upon to fulfill a certain, to build a certain product or whatever it happens to be, then it can be painful.
Yeah, and people, by the way, are the most expensive resource at any company.
Yeah.
Like, cost more than the building and the software and the hardware than anything else.
To John's point, honesty, transparency, that goes a long way. It's the difference between having a team and having somebody who punches in 9 to 5. It's the difference of the world. If people feel like they're being listened to and they have input on the company and they're having an impact, they're very engaged. They want to produce.
Chris and I have always had the benefit of being people who are both technical and business minded. And I mean, we built all the code for Pickaprof for like 5 years. We never had another developer coming in. We'd just do it ourselves at night and kind of work on the business side of it during the day, as co-CEOs of the company, and with several employees that were just worried about marketing and everything else. And going, like, when we go talk to entrepreneurs who are thinking about doing something, they're like, well, I want to build this, but I need like 3 developers, right? I'm like, just go learn how to code. It's like you can do this. This is not rocket science. It's computer science. But
And from that standpoint, you're all doing a great job.
But thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Absolutely.
And yeah, they'll be in touch.
And if anybody has
Yeah,
any
sure.
questions after this that come to you later, feel free to email John or I. I'm
Yeah.
volunteering John.
I'll send every one of you his email address.
And again, check out, or if you have resumes you want to send along for whatever reason,
W2group.com.
Chris at Homespin. It would be fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.